Hello, my wonderful viewers, and welcome to another episode of Betty Adams Overanalyzes. Today we are going to take a non-spoiler look at Kaiju number 8, chapter 79. Now, I am 99% sure it's no spoiler to tell you that this was a combat chapter, and we all know who was fighting in it. Matsumoto, though, has made it entirely something else. But not. Okay, what do I mean by that? Again, no spoilers because we all knew what was coming in this chapter. But the main part of the chapter, the fight, is not the focus of the chapter. Rather, the fight is the motif that runs through the chapter. So if you're looking at this chapter, we start on the fight, we end on the fight. There's plenty of pages for the focused on the current battle that's going on in, like I said, this is the second round of the tourney arc. But the combat, the techniques that the protagonist is using to fight the antagonist isn't the point of the chapter. Rather, it's the primary element that threads through the entire chapter as the chapter focuses on something else entirely. Now I want to take a little sidetrack. I swear it's relevant to the chapter, but I want to talk about two separate memes. The first meme is probably a fairly old one. You have a picture of a cat, but usually a dog because the contrast is better, and the dog is laying or sitting and kind of looking at the camera sideways. And it's usually a pug or some other dog that has a very stiff-looking face, and the caption is, "Does your dog bite? No, worse, he judges you." And the dog is looking at the camera with what appears to a human to be a very judgmental look. It's very amusing. Now, I can't tell you why that meme is relevant to this chapter until you actually go and read the chapter, but let me know in the comments below if you saw in the chapter why that meme was relevant. The second meme that is relevant to the chapter, there was this show called The Vicar of Dibley. Classic British BBC comedy. This very competent, but kind of flamboyant and engaging female vicar arrives in a very conservative small town in Great Britain. And through the processes of getting to know her parishioners and doing her duties, she runs across all sorts of adventures. And then there is the necessary Easter episode. And she's meeting a member of the church. She's at a meeting of the church deacons, and she goes, "Hey, did you know that so-and-so believes that our village has an actual Easter bunny?" And instead of the amusement that she expects, the entire church board just kind of goes, nods, and "Oh yeah, we do." And they acknowledge the fact that the Easter bunny exists, and then they move on with the church meeting. And the vicar is just sitting there looking at all of them in shock. And then, of course, later one of them sighs and goes, "Okay, we know it's just a member of our community dressing up as the Easter bunny to deliver candy on Easter morning, but yes, our village does have an Easter bunny." And the vicar goes, "Oh, okay." And then they go on with the meeting. And again, I can't explain to you why that meme is relevant. That's not the only media I've seen that meme in, but the concept is that someone says something outrageous, expecting to be laughed at or mocked, but then the person they respect accepts it and then offers a reasonable explanation. Chronicles of Narnia had this when the children explained the concept of the wardrobe to the professor. It's a repeating motif in a lot of fiction. So, and again, I can't, without spoilers, I can't explain why that meme applies to this chapter. But again, tell me how you think that meme applies to this chapter in the comments below. So we've got two memes. We've got the fact that this chapter, Matsumoto knows exactly what he's dealing with this story. He is dealing with a classic shonen manga, and that comes with certain limitations. And Matsumoto is working around those limitations so that this isn't just the second beat of the tourney arc. Matsumoto does that in this chapter by getting into the heads of the characters and not just the head of the main protagonist. We're stepping back, we're getting into the heads of other characters, seeing their perspectives so that we understand why this fight is so emotionally as well as tactically important to each individual character. We've got three main perspectives in this chapter. Each one of them has a powerful driving motivation, and we spend time in each of their heads in relation to how well we understand their motivations. One of the characters, we barely touch on their perspective because their motivation is just obvious. One of the characters, we get many panels explaining why this moment is so intense for that character, what that character stands to lose, what the stakes are for this character. And this shift of perspective, so that the fight itself, that we know can only have a few number of outcomes, Kikoru's not going to die. We all know that. We knew that from the beginning of the fight. She's too important to the story. Matsumoto's not going to waste that much character development and then kill off a character. So we know Kikoru can't die because of her plot armor. At worst, she might get temporarily absorbed by Kaiju number 9. She might win the battle with a firework victory that super damages her. She might just barely scrape out a win, but there really are only so many stakes you can put on a fight like this when you essentially know the outcome beforehand. And this is just one of the natural limitations of Shonen Jump manga. So what Matsumoto does is Matsumoto shifts the perspective of the chapter so that the fight is essentially in the background. It's still important, we're still enjoying the fight, but it's not the focus of the chapter. Rather, the focus, is, as I said, is in the minds of these three different characters. Each of these three characters have motivations, and those motivations are not necessarily in alignment. Each of them has their priorities, and what would be considered a victory from the main combatant's perspective, from Kikoru's perspective in this chapter, would not necessarily be a victory from the other two perspectives. And this is how Matsumoto puts actual stakes in the second round of the tourney chapter when you essentially know what's going to happen. For instance, if character A makes a tactical decision which enables Kikoru to win the battle, Kikoru might still consider that a defeat. That might be a stake that Kikoru can actually lose. Because remember, her goal for this battle was no one dies, which has already failed. So Kikoru's already failed her main goal. Her second goal for this battle was to not require help. And that is absolutely a stake where we don't know if she's going to win or fail. Yes. Then you have character B, who has their own goals, or other character C, who has their own goals, and character C can absolutely fail, and we have been made to care for character C because of how they've been built up in the series up to this point. So instead of just focusing on the main protagonist fight, Matsumoto has given us actual stakes where one of these characters is going to walk away from that battle inherently unhappy because Matsumoto has given us multiple protagonists that have conflicting goals, or at least conflicting methods to achieve those goals. And so we know that someone's going to come out of this unhappy. So there are actual stakes. Now the stakes aren't really life or death. Again, plot armor. We can assume certain things about what's going to go down. So to end this video on one final meme, in the words of Adam Savage, failure is always an option. And that is the real trick of the Shonen Jump mangaka. Can you make it so that in your story, failure is always an option? Now, there's so much in this chapter that I want to get into, but I can't without going into a fully spoilery review. So I'm going to get on that, and while I'm doing that, you can leave a comment below the video telling me what you think. Did you see any actual stakes in this chapter? Is there something that a character that we care about can actually lose? Or am I just blowing steam? Also, the Vicar of Dibley meme and the dog meme. Can you tell me where you saw those referenced in that video? Hit that like and subscribe button, and peace out, my wonderful viewers.